Hi guys, my name is Hector Rodriguez. I'm creator of El Peso Hero. That's what I'm known for. I'm also co-editor-in-chief of Chispa Comics and imprint of Scout Comics. I'm also CEO of Tex Latino Comic Con as well, and creative director for Mass Republic.
Andrea Lorenzo Molinari. I'm the editorial director for Scout Comics. My son and I work on a title called The Shepherd. We've got 4 volumes and number 5 rolling out of that series.
And my name is Mitchell Martinez. My title was Scout as part of their Scoot imprint, which is an all-age aimed primarily at children, and it is a superhero title called Wannabes. This trade here collects the first 4 issues, and I'm currently working on the next step. And yeah.
So out of all the work that the 3 of y'all have done, which work that the 3 of y'all have done would have liked to work on the others' work instead?
Good. Obviously for me it would be Shepherd. Looking into the adding a little bit more of the world building myself and maybe some of the influences, and growing up in Texas, I would like to maybe add some mythos and some grounded in that Southwestern history.
Absolutely.
And possibly even connected to just current events or social dynamics.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'd actually, as I think about it, it would be interesting to have a Shepherd story that deals with the Day of the Dead.
Right.
Some of that, some of the beliefs around that, especially the idea of the ability to commune with them at that time. I would love to do a Katrina's Caravan. That's one of the series that he's participated in and written in. And it's folklore, Mexican folklore, and it's like an anthology series.
Right, yeah, it's kind of like our Tales from the Crypt, and who doesn't love horror stories, right? And so I recall, as a kid, I grew up in College Station, Texas, and we had access to the Texas A&M library, and I would always, wander around the stacks and read their collections, their comic book collections, and that's how I gained a lot of the comic book history myself, and reading the omnibuses of the Tales of the Crypt, the Vault, the horror comics before the Code came in, right? It was before the Code, and so that's where we like to draw a lot of influences to, and with Katrina Caravan, we have a overarching story of the Katrina being chased by a Catholic priest that is said that their origin stories from the war of the it was a war in Mexico where the Catholic Church went into conflict with the government, and so we kind of tap into that history that hasn't been told. It's that whole separation of church and state. Well, Mexico kind of went through that conflict themselves. It's called the Cristero War. Yeah. But that's the overarching story arc, and we have different authors, writers, with their own really that one horror story that they really want to tell. And so it's continuing on. The next book will be out in October. Katrina's Caravan, The Last Latinx. What happens if non-Latino folks turn into ghouls, zombies? And for me, I'm the writer for that book, and I really tapped into. I'm a big George Romero fan, especially with the social commentary from Night of the Living Dead, with race relations, and you look into consumerism with Dawn of the Dead, and then Day of the Dead being more of societal dynamics and how that collapses, even within small groups.
Well, at first I wasn't really quite sure how to answer the question, because as somebody who wrote a superhero title, I feel like been told that with how many options for superheroes are out there, this is definitely a tougher book to pitch, but just today I found out about Hector's imprint, Chispa, and how he actually has like his own superhero titles, the 13, correct?
Right, yeah, we have the 13, which is aligns with Mesoamerican mythology, and it's kind of like we call it chispas because we're not, or they're not our mutants, but I think this copyright we're not able to say mutants, or but and so basically like this one is so Pilote, it's they tend to be more grounded within the community mindset, but yeah, so that's the world we're building, that kind of great world building aspect of Chispa Comics, yeah.
And that's like really one of the most exciting things about working on your own comic, in my opinion, just like being able to like create your own world with like its own history, its own rules and everything. And I mean, and there's so many different ways that you can go about that. Like you can try to make something as realistic as possible, or something as insanely cartoony as possible, or there's just like so much room to like, decide on what kind of rules you want to set for the kind of story you want to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how did Scout Comics get created? Is that is the group of y'all together, correct?
Right,
Okay.
right.
So how did that come to be?
So you got to keep in mind that happened before I arrived, for all of us, in all of our cases. In 2014, Brendan Deneen actually had an imprint, a self-published imprint, and he decided to gather other like-minded creators who would form this group called Scout. And that's really been the signature of Scout Comics from the beginning, is everybody in a leadership position in Scout is a creator themselves. So it's a creator-owned company. You own your imprint, your IP. You sign a contract. It's either a 5-year typically or a 10-year contract, and but you own it, and you get to decide. Like if somebody comes and expresses interest in optioning your title, you can say yes or no. So if it's somebody that you don't agree with, or they want to do something with it that you don't want done, the company Scout doesn't own your IP. At the end of your contract, you can re-up or you can walk. You're free. So I think that's a unique aspect of smaller press books. And like our president likes to talk about us as being kind of the modern version, in a small way of like Image Comics.
Right.
Definitely.
Absolutely, a big thing that you see today with writers and artists. They create an IP, they create a character or a book, and they're signed on with one of the big name companies, and they don't look into their contract. At the end of it, they realize they can't keep their character or their book unless they continue with their contract and renew it, and if they eventually get dropped, So, I mean, that is a great thing for Scout Comics that they do. What has been
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, everybody. So my question is in part for Mr. Rodriguez, but y'all and overall. I know, Hector, you've worked on the Black Demon book, which became a movie on Amazon Prime.
Right.
I enjoyed
Theaters too.
Yeah.
Theaters too, yeah.
In theaters too. Oh, I must have missed it.
Yeah, it was limited run.
Limited run?
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah.
that I had it in my part of the country. But my big question to you and to everybody else is, how do you feel, given your image of that story, they did with your overall outlook for the Black Demon? And then afterward, I asked you gentlemen, which one of your stories would you like to be made by Amazon, Netflix, or whomever? And do you have any theories about what they could do to your story in a movie setting? Like, I don't know if I like that how that came out. So that's my.
Yeah, it's a interesting journey. The connection between having your IP in a option for a movie or a series. And I had friends. You can look at Ben Dunn, Battle Angel. No, Warrior Nun, the creator of Warrior Nun. He's from Texas. You can look at Hector Cantu, creator of Baldo, the longest running Latino family comic book strip. Even Javier Hernandez, creator of El Muerto, which his indie book, which he created late 90s, was made into a featured film with Wilmer Valderrama called The Dead One. And so for me with El Peso Hero, since I created him in 2011 and I had the story before that, and so it started as a webcomic, and and then I got connected with producers. They wanted the media rights for El Peso Hero, but it wasn't until I actually made an agreement with somebody that actually understood the world, was Javier Chapa from Mucho Mas, our parent company of Chispa. And so I worked really closely with Javier Chapa, with other properties, and my partner in crime with Chispa Comics, the other co-editor-in-chief, co-publisher, David Bowles. He was actually, the Black Demon was originated from his story, his script. And so his story was developed, and before then, while the movie was in production, David and I were broadening that world, and I recall, having the actual movie script. And even though I read some of it, I didn't want to finish it just because I didn't want it to influence so much of my creativity when it came to the actual series. And for me, I really, with Black Demon, I tapped into, being a huge kaiju Godzilla fan, that world, as well as listening to, heavy metal inspired by Moby Dick. And so I tapped into that, and, and we were almost working alongside each other with the production of the team, getting stills from the movie, but we didn't want to be influenced so much about it, so that way we had some liberties in our creative world. But movie came out, it was a limited run, and it was released, Amazon purchased the distribution rights for Black Demon. And it was number one. It was number one for about 3 weeks when it premiered on Amazon Prime, and it was very successful, and we got a lot of great feedback, and I was very blessed to write the issue number 1, and this is the variant cover with my art. And Black Demon continues on, which actually we have Black Demon Descent, a new chapter of the Black Demon Tales coming out in September. And so, for issue 2 of Black Demon Descent, it's going to be very inspired by Pacific Rim, which I love. It's going to be a giant mech shark versus the Black Demon. What makes the Black Demon different is the fact that it taps into the spiritual, supernatural aspects of a kaiju, which hasn't been done. And so it's like this kaiju is unstoppable, but it's tapped into some realm of spirituality and Mesoamerica lore.
Excuse me, I just want to say the very statement of a giant mecha shark going up against Black Demon, that is probably the coolest thing I'll hear all week.
It's a cool cover, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess from my title, first of all, it hasn't been optioned, so I don't know what, you think about things like that. My main focus, of course, is telling the stories that I'm telling, because I can't control what other people want to do. But because it's in the afterlife, one of the things that my son, Roberto, who's my co-writer, that we talk about a lot is a lot of supernatural books that deal with the afterlife, that type of thing. They devolve into angels versus demons. You saw a lot of that in, what's the television show that went for so long? Supernatural, thank you. And I just feel like my issue with that, with ghost stories that we're telling, is that angels versus demons kind of takes the responsibility away from people. And I'm a big believer in personal responsibility for the stuff that we do. I feel like there's way too much when you deal with supernatural stories, that whole idea of the devil made me do it, you know? And I'm like, no, we own your own stuff, you know? And because you can't ever heal from it, you can't ever move on from it until you own what you've done, good and bad, you know? And so for me, that would be the big concern, and that would be the deal breaker. Like if I was dealing with a company that wanted to produce The Shepherd, is I would say this, you can have demons, you can have angels, but it cannot devolve into a war between those two. It's gotta be about the individual soul. What has traumatized that individual soul, the burdens that they carry, the guilt that they carry for things that they did or didn't do, and then the very human and sometimes very painful dealing with that, accepting it, facing up to it, when possible, apologizing or trying to make it right in some way, whatever way that's possible. Because I feel like that really is a more compelling story, you know? And the kinds of ghost stories that we tell in the Shepherd series are very much those kind where you've seen them before. They're ghost stories where there's a reason why the ghost is haunting.
Right.
And once that is resolved, the ghost, you know, moves on.
Right.
And that's the kind of stories that we tell. So I wouldn't want it to devolve into that angel versus demon thing, because it eliminates the personal responsibility and it eliminates that ability for the ghost to be able to go through its own story arc and journey to resolution.
So you see it more as a series, as a show than a...
Very much so, because the way we like to think about it is, because it takes place in the afterlife, any person who has ever lived from any culture that has ever existed is fair game.
Right.
You know? And basically what the Shepherd is doing is helping those souls resolve things that they need to resolve so that they can move on to be with the ones that they love. For example, the second volume that we told is called The Path of Souls. And it's a hospital in the afterlife for the souls of soldiers that are suffering from PTSD. And they're from different cultures and time periods. We have a Native American, the white man called them Huron, but they called themselves Wendat. He died fighting the Iroquois in 1648. You have a Napoleonic soldier who died in Jaffa in 1799, a Confederate soldier who died in 1862 in Fredericksburg, and a US Marine who died in Fallujah, 2004. And that idea that each one of them has a different story, but they're all in some way connected. And the Shepherd kind of like enters their story and is not providing all the answers, but is accompanying them and helping them, giving them the right nudges to get them where they need to be.
Well, with my series, as of right now, I just have the first story arc that has been published. That's issues 1 through 4, only available in this trade. And so I've got issue 5 in the works, but my story has really only just begun. But I have definitely given some thought about what I would like to see if I was ever given the chance to see my series get adapted. And going in, I would recognize that, like, you know, when you're taking one piece of media and adapting it into a completely different medium, there would be, like, you know, need to be some tweaks here and there, and I do understand that. But if I had any sort of say, first of all, I would definitely want my series to take an animated route. I definitely see it as like more of like a series, but if it got turned into like a movie, that would probably be okay. But I definitely think that something like animation would definitely be a better way of like properly conveying it. Because one thing that I really can't stand in like the entertainment industry is when people try to like downplay animation as a medium. Like, you know, even with like just so many great different films and series out there, there's like still this mindset among some people that like, you know, cartoons are just for children and nothing more. And I mean, just because there are cartoons for kids, that doesn't mean that there isn't animation out there for, like, you know, adults as well. I mean, like, do people forget that, like, The Simpsons are a thing? Like,
Family Guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, obviously, like, you know, my book is like, you know, aimed at like all ages, so that would like definitely be like the target demographic. But that doesn't mean I would want to see the book like, you know, dumbed down for like, you know, what some out-of-touch executive thinks is like appropriate for like 5-year-olds or something like that. And also, this would probably be a long shot, but if I had any say on what the soundtrack of my series is like, I would definitely want to get Ron Wasserman as the composer. Just saying.
He still rocks.
Yeah, oh, he absolutely does.
Yeah, he's way too good for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Another thing I wanted to ask, going on what you replied, yeah, I've noticed, the stigma of animation only for kids. Forget about anime for one, how it has been, something I think is mostly for teenagers and up to adults, and they'll have their little kitty Astro Boy, whatever. Because growing up, we always watched Gundam and Dragon Ball Z, which heavily edited for American audiences.
I can see their parachutes. They're okay.
Yes, exactly. And they're like, oh, Kakarot got something pushed through his chest, and they're like, yeah. But I like the way you envision your series as animation, because there are very good animated series out there.
Sure.
Recently, I watched HBO's Primal, which was a very, very good series, which I could not see done anywhere, any way, other than animation. But it was really great, and I'm really, really fascinated by the stories you have in your soldier characters.
Thank you.
And I think that like the same kind of stigma could like also apply to like comics, because I mean like even with like the massive successes with like various different movies and shows that have been adapted from comics, there's still probably some people out there who think that like stuff like superheroes or comics in general are like only for like kids or immature people, when really comics are like any other medium. There's all sorts of different genres and all sorts of like different levels of who their audiences are. There's so much wiggle room, and that's one of the great things about it.
Absolutely. I've often noticed like, oh, you read comic books, the little kitty things, but give that person Watchmen and have them change their mind, or any series done by great writers, whether it be Alan Moore or any other great writers.
Or like heck, Andrea and I were just like talking earlier about how amazed we were with like how long the Walking Dead series lasted as like a TV show. And I mean like, is the comic still going on?
Oh no,
It ended
Okay.
a few years ago, abruptly.
Yeah, it was a good. It needed. I mean, Robert Kirkman ended in a high note. I think. Before it
Was the ending at least better than how the show ended?
Oh, I didn't finish the show. I lost it. When,
I checked out the last episode just like out of curiosity, even though I stopped watching in like season 3 or 4, and I was just like, and honestly, I was like, that's it.
Yeah, the comics were way better.
Comics are always better.
So do y'all have a dream project to where like if you were ever offered this specific thing, it's an immediate, yes, I'll do it. Like, do you have anything
something in
like
mainstream industry, like mainstream
or it doesn't have to be
comics?
mainstream, like could be a smaller comic that you're just like in love with, or just something like a favorite character or something you want to have.
Yeah, I got it. I know exactly.
Okay.
I can tell you exactly. I'd love to do a team up with the Shepherd and Hellboy. I think it would totally work. I'm a huge fan of Mike Mignola. Although, believe it or not, my favorite character from the Mignola verse is actually Baltimore. I don't know if you've ever read Baltimore. It's an alternate reality World War I environment where vampires have become a thing, and such a serious problem that the war had to be stopped, and the soldiers going back home to try to protect their respective countries.
That's actually really.
Yeah, and it's really, really good. But I love pretty much everything that Mignola does. But I tend to like, my favorite characters are his peripheral characters, Lobster Johnson, Baltimore, characters like that.
Right.
So Abe Sapien is another. I like Abe Sapien a lot. So, but yeah, that would be my dream job, is to do that someday.
I would want to say that like my dream thing, like if I were to go with like a character who's a little more like mainstream or from a mainstream company, my first instinct would be to say Batman, but at the same time, like he's one of those characters who is just like so popular that there's like so many different like mandates and editorial standards you have to like stick with, and just well, some writers can work with that, but like if I was given the first crack at it, I don't think I'd be ready for it. So if I had to choose something like that, I'd probably go with like the James Gunn approach and like choose there's like some lesser known characters to work with. And in that case, it'd probably be, I really want to see more of the Great Lake Avengers from Marvel Comics. Like those guys are just like so indescribably funny. They have been for like the longest time. And to this day, like the last comic they had, which was like a couple years ago, it was so good, and I have no idea why it only lasted 8 issues. Like it was just like boom, boom, boom. Every single issue was just so freaking funny and just. But yeah, if I could, I would definitely bring those guys back in a big way.
I guess for me, I would obviously it would be with Professor Hero. I would love for him to fight or work along with Captain America, also Luke Cage. And I think I would love to tackle Superman too. I think I have one good Superman story to tell. It would be those mainstream characters, those IPs. Definitely.
If you're good, that's fine. Yeah.
I mean, I was expecting more people.
Oh, it's all right. Yeah. I mean, let's go.
But this is y'all's panel, so.
Well,
I'm trying to.
can you guys share out your influences, in the comic book?
Yeah, who influenced y'all to make y'all's individual things?
Well, I knew that what properties did stick out to me more growing up and such, but it wasn't until I actually started putting the book together and started collaborating with Andrea as my editor that he made me realize that the elevator pitch for my book is kick-ass but with superpowers and for kids. And at that moment I was like, yeah, the original film of the first volume of Kick-Ass, that movie really did impact me in quite a few ways when I was putting this together. And I mean some people have also said that it kind of has an Invincible feel to it, though I've very casually read the Invincible comics and I didn't start watching the show until after this came out. The show is fantastic though.
Oh, yeah.
What about you?
For me, so it would, grew up in the 90s, and so it would be Image Comics, too. Image Comics definitely left an impression. And knowing the backstory, too, later on, respecting that, just these, creators that really wanted to, take more control of their artistic endeavors, and to this day, I listen to, podcast. It's not Jim Lee. You have Todd McFarlane and you have Jim Lee, some Valentino, and these guys breaking. The barriers, the molds, Rob Liefeld. Rob Liefeld, and as much as folks disliked his artistic styles, he has actually pretty good podcast going, just about the history, just the behind the scenes of that, the 90s, and, and learning a lot of the, history, I was a huge reader of Wizard magazine. But it was, right. But it wasn't until later knowing the background of the trying to manipulate the comic book market with the price guy and so on. There's so much in stories I did not know and controversies with the price guides and the folks behind Wizard magazine trying to influence books, and so. Anyway, so growing up in the 90s, just the extreme 90s. And I mean, before that, my dad, being an Army vet, he would bring home Mad magazine. And so I loved Sergio Aragonés art as well. And, growing up in the border, being border of Texas and Mexico. And, being a consumer of Mexican media, either Mexican wrestling, lucha libre, as well as I had my aunt was an owner of a VHS rental store, and so I had a huge accessibility towards movies, and as well as anime that has never been released in the stateside, as well as even some Japanese movies that were imported, just dubbed in Spanish, and that haven't seen the light of day in the United States. And so I had that influence. And so, and of course, being a huge Godzilla fan too, kaiju fan. And so all these different aspects really influence my creative and my narrative upbringing too.
And I was actually reminded of a conversation that Andrea and I were having earlier about how it's like next to impossible not to be influenced by things you encounter, and just you talking about the 90s just made me think about all the other things that influenced me growing up, whether it was Batman the Animated Series or Power Rangers or the various anime I saw on Toonami, just so many different, I could just probably go on and on and on about my own personal influences.
So what about you, Andrea?
Well, I never intended to do this. That was not the plan. I had given up comic books because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and if you were in the 80s, a guy reading comic books in high school, you were guaranteed to never have a date. Ever. Okay? So wanting to actually have girls talk to me, I stopped reading comic books. When I went to college, my roommate, or the room guy who was next door, my neighbor, he said, do you like comics? And I said, yeah, I used to read them when I was a kid. And he said, well, what'd you like? I said, well, I used to like Batman. I read a lot of Batman and Brave and Bold and stuff like that. And he said, now, mind you, this is 1985, and I'm in college when I was a freshman. And he's like, well, here's something I want you to read. He hands me, guess what he's handing me? In 1985, Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
Well, it kicked my butt. I mean, I had never seen. You got to understand, I was growing up with a Batman from Batman 66, watching reruns of that as a little child, and then reading, Batman Brave and Bold, where he's consulting with Commissioner Gordon in front of the police officers at the crime scene. Right. And now Frank Miller comes along with this thing that actually makes sense. It's a Batman that actually makes sense. He wouldn't be accepted. He would be the outsider. He would be, a true vigilante. And
so how did that feel? I mean, as a wholly, seeing this whole different perspective of Batman.
It blew me away, and it brought me back. It brought me back to comics. And so I became a reader at that point. And of course, The Crow was a huge imprint on my mind.
The Crow was fantastic.
So those are what's happening. Now, mind you, as this is going on, I'm going through my academic career because I have a doctorate in ancient religious literature. So I'm reading early Christian folklore and mixing that with the mythology from the Greeks, Romans, Carthaginians, Egyptians, Canaanites, Sumerians. And so I'm running into all this, and that became my major influences, those kind of ancient world things. That's where the shepherd comes out of, because the most ancient piece of Western literature is the Gilgamesh epic,
right,
which comes from the Sumerians and Babylonians, and it has a journey in the afterlife as part of the Gilgamesh epic. And then I'm reading it, in the Greeks and Romans. It's like every important person in the Greek and Roman mythology has a journey in the afterlife. If you don't, you're not cool. Hercules does it, Dionysius does it, Persephone, the list goes on and on. So I'm seeing how common that is.
Right.
Those journeys, and they're amazing stories. So that really became a major influence for the shepherd, is just saying, I'd like to tell stories in the afterlife. I'd like to, visit, other places. And then the more I studied it, the more I realized that this thing never stopped. Think about Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. What is happening there? You're journeying in the afterlife,
right?
Past, present, and future. So I realized, Dante's Divine Comedy, etc. It just goes on and on. It continues. And even something as silly as Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Think about it. that those kinds of stories are endemic in our culture, and they cross cultural lines.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's really, I kind of wanted to plug into that. You know, anyway. So.
Do you all have questions?
Who was y'all's favorite comic book character as kids?
I would say.
Don't say Hong Kong Phooey.
Right. No. I mean, I actually have a lot of Batman. It would be Batman. Yeah. I mean, just out of my collection, I have. I love Marvel stories, but I have more DC comics than anything else, and so I just kind of gravitated towards that world, and I, somehow I don't know, I gravitate towards Batman, and some of the great Batman stories are grounded in more of it is him as a detective, of a crime noir, story, which is, it just kind of draws you in the mystery of it,
Did you like the Robert Pattinson Batman movie?
I did, and I was like,
Yeah, honestly, I think that's the best one they've made so far.
yeah, and that's what I always wanted to see. I always wanted to see that detective, the super detective, Batman, the mystery, and we got some of it. Yeah, I think we can do a little bit more. It's like I know who's the creator of 100 Bullets. It starts with a B. Bessario, or I think that's his last name. Gosh, I'm butchering it. But he actually, and he's known for the crime noir, and so I remember picking up his run, and it was amazing because it was just Batman grounded as basically conducting an investigation of what is eating these missing children, and so there's it really draws me in, and maybe that's why I have a kind of a neo-Western comic book character with El Paso Hero that's grounded in the him fighting cartels, criminal organizations in the border, and so that's what I'm drawn.
Well, definitely growing up as a kid, there was like a constant battle in my head of like whether I like Batman better or Spider-Man better, because like growing up in the 90s, I of course I had Batman the animated series and Spider-Man the animated series. Fox Kids was like my everything as a kid. So those two were definitely a major influence, but a surprising third would be like actually probably Spawn, because of when I saw the director's cut of the movie. I was 6 when I saw the R-rated cut of Spawn.
Oh, wow.
Because my dad just grabbed the videotape and was like, "Here, I know you like superheroes. Just here, watch this and leave me alone for a little bit." Didn't even look
that
at
was the animated version?
no.
Oh, thank God.
No, it was a live. It was a live action movie. I never saw the HBO series growing up.
The animated one is way different. I'd be like,
That was great. The animated version.
it was.
Well, see now, honestly, like I do like recognize the merits of the animated series, but honestly, I only like the first season of that show. Seasons like 2 and 3 don't really have much of a plot, in my opinion. But
And it's sort of a huge cliffhanger. I remember that. With what's her name, Angelica coming in, right? What's her?
Angela.
Angela.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Although I don't think that they could use her at that time.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so yeah. When I saw the R-rated version of the Spawn movie, I was literally 6 years old. So
Wow.
And so yeah, so for that reason, even though I don't really care much for the comics, I'll always have a soft spot for the character, and I'm also thanks to it and also the symbiote from Spider-Man, I'm also obsessed with living costumes too. I just think that's really cool. Oh, and capes. Gotta have capes.
I think living costumes is a little on the creepy side. Do you want something alive?
No, it absolutely
that close
is.
to your body?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, but I'm just like
personal.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying that there are definitely some advantages to it.
Have you guys seen Guyver by Strong?
Oh yeah, that is great. That's great. The manga, the 2 different anime series, the really horrible first live-action movie, and the surprisingly good sequel that it got, but no one ever saw.
Guy reads her.
Yeah, I would say the ones I liked to read a lot when I was a kid was Daredevil, Batman, Green Arrow. I was right with you, the street level heroes.
Yeah.
I like Luke Cage.
Yeah.
I always loved, like, if you read the original Luke Cage stuff, this is from the 1970s, it's pretty, like, not good by modern standards. And this, for a lot of reasons, like, it's pretty racist. But there are also some really funny aspects of it too, like his shirt always getting shot off.
Yeah.
You're like, I just bought that shirt, you know?
Right.
That always cracked me up as a little kid. His poor guy could never keep a shirt nice, you know?
Another really funny thing about older comics like that is that like you know, back in like the 60s, 70s, and even somewhat in like the 80s too, comic characters didn't really talk like normal people. You know, they had like very stilted, like, you know, exposition heavy dialogue all the time.
Yeah.
And then one day somebody invented recap pages for the start of books.
All right, so where could y'all find your work at? I mean, sorry, social plugins.
Yeah.
Well, as of right now, I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Wannabe's Comic Creator, and my book, both the trade and the single issues and all merchandise are available. Well, like, you know, the trade and the issues can be available in comic shops, but everything is also completely available on scoutcomics.com.
Yeah, my social media is predominantly Instagram, Facebook, mostly Instagram. That is the one I post to the most. And it's theshepherdcomic.com. We'll get you to the website. Of course, it's also on Scout.
For Chispa, you can find Chispa. You can go to chispacomics.com, as well as you can pre-order all the books coming out through scoutcomics.com as well. And for my personal site, just search for El Puzzle Hero on Instagram, Facebook, and if you search for El Puzzle Hero, you see all the upcoming news, articles, video interviews, TV appearances, all that good stuff.
Great, thank you. Is there anything else that y'all wanted to add today as to what's happening over at Scout Comics?
Any big? Oh yeah, we have the eBay. We're on eBay now.
We're on eBay. They're doing auctions, live auctions on eBay. I think even this weekend they're doing a marathon thing. Okay. That's a great way to get some really good deals.
Yeah.
Anything else that y'all got planned for the future? Big news?
I think we're all working on new projects.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's making a lot of books. We have a big horror ash can preview of a movie coming out called Rosario. It's kind of Evil Dead with a Latino spin on it. Rosario is I think the movie's going to be premiered at a film festival soon. And also Katrina's Caravan new arc begins in October. Of course, Black Demon as well next month in September, and we have the 13th wrapping up in November, and then we're going to the big team book called The Rise of the Five, which we're talking about the antagonist, the bad guys, which is great. Great, really cool story, and a lot of great books coming out.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank y'all for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the crowds go wild.